Thank you. That was a very warm introduction and very happy to be here. I hope all of you are having fun. You want? Well, now you're going to have fun. We're going to unfold some very interesting topics. Sanjay, Raju, very happy to be here. And
likewise. Our pleasure.
So we are all GCCs gathered here, and we are looking at numbers must have been shared, so I'm not going to take a shot at that if I get it wrong by a few tens or hundreds. And in GCC world, you usually get it wrong by hundreds, right? So if I say 1,500, somebody will say 1,600. So let's call it 1,500 plus are already here, and we are doing very well in India. There are another 500, 600 that KSV and nasscom beautifully talk to say, which are going to get added. So let's talk about 2,000 plus is the number where we are going to be. Now in all of this, again, quoting nasscom and their research reports, they say we've gone through 3 evolutions, and we are at the 3rd generation today. We started by just establishing ourselves, call it building, then we looked at enterprise capability, and today we are at business value enabler. And when we were chatting, we were very clear. That's the game we are going to talk about, and that's the only focus we're going to have in the conversation. And within that, Sanjay and Raju, what we would love to unfold is where's customer in this, and how is it that we can monetize the customer-first culture? So if you've had your tea break, you've had your coffee, and you're totally tuned in, well, that's the next 25 minutes of conversation by 2 very esteemed panelists who've been introduced. And with that starts my first question. And it's open, so feel free. Who wants to go first? When we are looking at the journey today, where we are strategic business value enablers, and India is really on the map, and beginning with where the GCC is, the journey could be early, mid. We are going to talk about the top game. And with that, you were talking about there are some sub-transformation journeys. Everybody's taking a different route to get there. Sapient will take a different route, and of course, Tesco might have taken. So shed some light on that to say, how are we doing on this game, and what's your prediction, more importantly, for next few years?
Sure. No, thanks, Supria. I think, as you said, right, it's an evolution, and I think what started off many, many years back as a cost play, I think we're firmly in the value play territory. I think, and even transformation, if you're going to break it down, I think one of the big shifts you've seen is, CapEx moving to India more and not just OpEx, right? I think that's one of the big trends. And within OpEx, I think first there was just an efficiency in finding how do you get more return on OpEx, or on CapEx. I think the phase we're in now is innovation. And I think how do you drive more innovation from India? So for us, our focus is on the digital business transformation space. Where I see innovation happening now, and that's, to me at least, the future trend is going to come from integrated perspectives. I think that's going to be the switch that will unlock innovation. I think for what's happening is currently we look at, for example, engineering is a very, very well-told story. I think everybody gets that. But I think when I say integrated perspective, it's really about looking at through a lens of what we call speed, but it's really strategy, product, engineering, experience, and data. I think what you have in India today is a massive potential for capabilities even outside of engineering, which can create integrated perspective on the business. So for example, product management. I think it's not as much talked about. I think it's a massively exploding capability and field in terms of just its potential. You look at experience design. So now you actually have the ability in India to thread multi-capability teams that can talk about the business strategy and the evolution of it, have a perspective on what's the value pool and unlock in the context of a product. How do you design for a consumer and unlock that value? How do you make it real with engineering? And how do you use data to keep it intelligent, right? And the minute you do that, you're just kicking off a continuous chain, and which is what really innovation is. Innovation is not a one-time activity. It's about building. It's like my analogy is the difference between wellness and dieting. Dieting is like you got a finite endpoint, which is why it usually never works. At least it doesn't work in my case. But wellness is about finding out what will you do differently to continuously keep adding value. And I think the minute you bring this integrated perspective, and as GCCs, we look at saying, how do you thread all these capabilities together? I think what in the stage is set for India to, I think, take on a far, far larger share of just value creation in the overall space. And I think that's where it's going to trend.
Very well said, Sanjay. And what I hear you saying is there are these individual things we do where we've done it in the yesteryears. We're now looking at a systemic, integrated, multi-pronged capability sitting in India, almost like a mini HQ, I would love to call it, and hopefully a large HQ in future. Raju, you're so passionate about transformation. What's your view on this, and what do you predict?
I think my view is it's a remarkable journey that what GCC went through compared to what the erstwhile was doing it. The most important thing which I see in the GCCs was actually value. and in a continuous improvement way, okay? And not just like as Sanjay was saying is right, like you innovate once and then you stop there. Okay? It's like continuously innovating. And it's not just about either just engineering, it's about how you bring the product management into the journey, okay? How you can enable a full product life cycle management from India, okay? I think the journey has been remarkable, as I said. So if I look at it in today's context, right, the GCCs are delivering value in a repeatable way. They're identifying new opportunities, and they're able to take it up to the business leaders of new opportunities where they can invest onto, okay, and identifying opportunities where they can make it work. Okay. Most importantly, when I look into the future, okay, of this is right, it requires a bit of a shift in the change how the organizations are structured, how you can bring innovation into your DNA and make it happening every day, okay, of it. And most importantly is creating an environment and a culture of continuously doing this. That's how I look at it.
Outstanding, brilliant. Keep at it continuously. And of course, we are reaching where we want to reach. You know, this is the overall context of where we are as business value enablers, and, you know, very well put on different journeys. You know, completely now building on it to say the customer first culture. Now the customers come in various forms and sizes, right? And they're evolving demands. There's an entire landscape shift in the way customers are. Sometimes they're just a data point in a large retail environment, right? Somebody's analyzing in, you know, in a faceless business marketplace. So talk to us as to how is it that, what's new? Like I always say, we exist for customers, right? So when nasscom says do a session on customer first, and I'm like, wow. So talk to us about what's new in this customer first culture. What is it that we are doing now we haven't done before?
Yeah, I think it's, you're so right, right? Since time immemorial, ever since the first commercial organization existed, you had to be customer-centric, otherwise you weren't, you didn't last for very long. I think what's changed is the context, right? So I think the behavior of the consumer is pivoting at a far faster rate because of, you know, things that are changing, and, you know, it's the options the consumer has to the business context that's changing, you know, and just the world context that's changing, right? If you think right from the, you know, the pandemic to geopolitical issues to inflation to technology, name it, these are factors that can drive change in consumer behavior. I think what's changed, therefore, is what's your sensing mechanism to appreciate the change in velocity of consumer behavior. And if that has to happen, you don't have the time anymore for only one part of the organization to sense it, then signal it to the next part, then to the next part, and then to the next part, because the consumers change thrice over by then. So the only way it will work is almost by a surround, which means everybody is trying to examine that consumer behavior together. So what needs to change is that everybody in the organization, you know, GCC or not, doesn't matter, everybody has to know the consumer. Everybody has to know what is the business that the company is in. Who is my consumer? How does this company make money? Because then you start to tune into what's changing in the consumer, and then you build that agility of how do you respond to that. So first is, do I have the mechanism of sensing? Then do I have the agility to respond to the change? I mean, for example, you know, one of my examples of, now it's a little old, is when demonetization was announced the first time around, everybody knew there was going to be friction in cash spending. Only one company came up with QR code-based spending, right? Everybody had the opportunity. It was not groundbreaking technology, but someone joined the dots saying, there's friction, and there's the way to address it. So they had a sensing mechanism of getting it. There was consumer friction. More importantly, they had the agility of responding to it. So what's going to be different is, how does everybody, right, and not get layered in sensing change in consumer and then responding to it and monetizing it? Because the slices of opportunity will be many, but those slices will be thin because everybody's going to sense it and move towards it. So you just have to build that muscle of continuous change.
So I have a follow-up question on that, Sanjay, and very well said that in the entire ecosystem in the world is crumbling. There was one company that spotted opportunity and rode the wave. So I'm going to now flip the question to say there are others who couldn't do it. So what is it that we are missing, or more importantly, what is it that we need to do as GCCs to make sure that, well, this is how you sense and this is how you do it? Because people, when we are sitting in GCCs, we are far removed from customers. We aren't interacting with them on a day-to-day basis, perhaps, from the environment. And I ran a GCC, and I knew that people in India who are building the stuff for the customer have never seen it, never seen the customer. So what are one or two things you'll say have worked within your experience, which can bring this sensing back to a day-to-day operational life?
Yeah, I think sure Raju
Sure.
can add even more to this, but the first thing is build the expectation. You know, it's one of my favorite sayings is, the eye can see what the mind is willing to comprehend, right? And if you don't think it's an expectation of you sitting in the GCC to know your consumer, you'll never know your consumer.
Intentionality.
The day you know that it is your expectation to know the consumer, you will start to know the consumer, you'll start to get better at knowing your consumer, and then soon you'll start excelling in knowing your consumer, and then you'll start innovating in where is my consumer going to go next. So it's first just starts with the expectation, and then you will build out the rest of the ecosystem. But if you don't see the need, we'll never build what we have to. And that starts by directly immersing yourself in the context. I agree that physically we may not be in the consumer context a lot of times, but today we're the most global, connected, world ecosystem ever in the history of mankind. There is no information not available to us, but do you have I'm just borrowing the word you just used, intentionality, to actually make that happen. But the minute you make that an expectation, and then you bring in the frameworks and the metrics and everything else, which you only improve what you measure, right? And you start to measure that, make an expectation and other things. And I don't know, Raju, you guys have made this
I think
journey
the word you used is the right thing, right? Like it's a consumer behavior. The customer remains same, but the consumer behavior is what is actually changing. Like if you look at in the retail world where we operate with a very thin margins, okay, the behavior of the consumer, knowing it in advance, is making a very crucial thing. And this is where either you can talk about adopting technology, digitalization, any of those things you say, but how do you know the consumer behavior is changing? Like for example, if you look at it, right, for the retail, the COVID, actually the pandemic, has taught us a very good lesson in that perspective. The consumer behavior changed drastically overnight from choosing what they want, where they want, and how they want towards stockpiling the essential items that is required for them. And then the regulations coming up day by day, okay, on what you can purchase, how you can purchase, and the limitations on it. So it's not just the technology that enabled the whole thing, right? It's the GCC, thousands of people working out from India, okay, really helped us to shape up the consumer behavior and helping the technology actually adopt to that and making that happen very quickly. Okay, that is a very, very good example we have learned from that. And there is now example we are actually using in every day, okay, of our end-to-end processes when we are looking at how these systems can really adopt to that behavior.
So Raju, I'm going to start with you on this one. We have so much data out there, right, which is obviously telling us about consumer behavior. And how do you think that's translating, and not in terms of monetization, but in terms of changing the way we work so that we are actually breathing customer first? Because if I completely flip from a GCC to an entrepreneurial journey, we begin by solving a problem. And when we begin, we start raising money. And then we completely forget about customer, and the layers come in, the structures come in, the systems come in. And customer kind of just gets lost in the process. And then the customer moves on to something else that's readily available. So how do we build, in your way, in a retail way, or any other customer-first culture? What are the 2-3 things we can do?
It's a global organization structures, and that is what actually is enabling us for doing it, right? It's like a root deeply into the culture, thinking globally. And then it's no longer silos. It's like interconnected, and the information flows very smoothly from one end to the other. Okay, decisions happens very quickly, and the agility and ability of an organization to change quickly with the data points that is coming in is what actually is really driving the innovation behavior in Tesco. So it is actually now is embedded into the culture of us, the globality, the innovation, and the work culture that actually collaboratively sharing information between the systems.
Awesome. All moving parts and yet moving in one direction in a very concerted, focused North Star. Lovely. Now, we are all representing GCCs here, most of us, right? And I know I've been part of GCC, and I often would hear and get confused to say, who is my customer? The HQ sometimes becomes my customer, and that's a very colonial language of being captive, and that's not appreciated very well. But we get marked as that. And yet, sometimes we have enterprise mindset, and the end consumer is your customer. So if any of you are confused, then I'm going to ask the panelists to say, and Sanjay, you touched upon it briefly. So talk to us a little bit more about who is our customer, and how do we breathe our customer day in, day out, and how do we make our customers stick to us and kind of for a lifetime, or whatever time business defines the life.
Yeah, no, I think in the context of a GCC, I know this is a more kind of complex question, but it's that's because we sometimes see the world as a layered place, right? As I said, if you just go back to the circular view, it's the same question I should be asking, even if I was sitting in London or in New York at this point, saying, who's your consumer, right? Or who's your customer? I think anyone that you're delivering value in the context of your work is your consumer. Now, so when I say everybody should know how the company makes money and who is your consumer, it's about knowing at the end of the day, who is that person ultimately that needs to see the value for everything to then work backwards from there. But that doesn't mean that's your only consumer. That's the ultimate consumer for the organization. Then you've got to look at saying, what is the work that I'm doing delivering value to, and who is it delivering value to? And that has to finally ladder up to that consumer. But my immediate consumer might be someone who's a direct recipient of the work I'm doing today. So for example, if we are creating, let's say we've got a team that's creating a new solution that allows us to deploy people in a more efficient manner. My consumer is going to be the teams that need to be configured, and those teams, let's say project managers or architects or anyone who's configuring those teams. They are my immediate consumer. Am I removing their friction point of being able to configure teams? But it doesn't take away my ability to understand that if those teams can be configured in a better manner, helps us deliver work more profitably, which then helps us make our clients more successful, which then means as a company we make money. So my immediate focus is to know that what is the friction point I'm trying to now take care of. Now, the reason how you try to address that is when we look at people that we bring on board, we look for three things. One is craft. You've got to be the best in the world at what you do. Otherwise, why are you in the conversation at all? Second, consulting. Because craft, for the sake of craft, is actually of no value. Because I must know my craft is working in what context to create value. That's consulting. Then leadership. And leadership has nothing to do with hierarchy. Leadership is about acting with edge, taking ownership, taking accountability, taking risk. If you have people who have all these three perspectives, it doesn't matter which country you live in, you will create world-beating teams. And then all your internal and external consumers, friction points will be addressed because they will look at each one of these as an opportunity to create value, knowing that if I can create internal value, it will enable external value. In some cases, I'm working on external value directly, and I will enable that as well. Because a lot of times people feel, and I've seen this a lot of times, oh, let's deprioritize this project. It's only an internal project. And then you feel you're cutting the nose to spite the face because it makes no sense. Because if you don't get this right, you're ultimately not going to succeed anyway. Right. So that's how you have to layer this by being very objective about where is the value creation happening and who is it in service of. And if you have that clarity, I think the framework works both internally and externally. Well,
I'm updating my resume and calling it Craft Consulting and Leadership, and we are having a conversation after that. Awesome. I think that's very well said. Raju, Enabling the Enablers is pretty much the title that on a side note you go by. So talk to us about that.
Sometimes the end customer may not be the customer you are serving in. Okay, so in the space where I was actually doing the transformation, which is one of the largest transformations at Tesco, is enabling people to serve your customers better. Okay. It's no longer running a payroll operations, but it is about touching the touch points of all what actually matters for you, like recruitment, induction, taking through the journey of digital learning, then also basically making them ready for the store operations or distribution operations, so providing them an environment where they can actually go and marketplace themselves when they can work, when they can work, what skills they can acquire, and building digital learning platforms. Giving them the tools, could be sometimes recorded videos, sometimes instructor-led, sometimes could be is like we borrow content from and we pay for it. And this providing this, and then this is basically a structured learning program, allowing them to continuously learn and move up. So this has all been done with an intention that they would serve the customer better, whoever is walking into the store or purchasing through an online or any of those things. Some of the things we actually went ahead and looked in how we can actually do these things is we considered our workforce as digital workforce. That means we have the flexibility to move the people around where they are needed and how they are needed when they are. It's giving us the flexibility and helping us to serve our customers better.
Raj, I'm going to stay with you a minute longer. We've spoken all nice stuff, it's interdependencies. We are solving a problem that's our customer, and probably the consumer is at the end, but the customer is everywhere. I'm going to stay with you and say, in context of transformation, we're transforming a culture to become customer first. What do you think are the one or two roadblocks, like biggest roadblocks that perhaps we have to cross to get there?
See, in my case, it was an 100-year-old organization, right? culture becomes the most difficult part to break. Okay? So any change coming in, okay, integrating with your legacy systems, with your new systems, old processes, new processes, training 500,000 colleagues of adopting, right? They all becomes your critical blockers. But it's where the whole change management comes into picture, okay? Enabling the change to roll out smoothly. And building these systems with an experience the colleagues doesn't require a handful of trainings, but can easily adopt. For us, always we give an examples like if Facebook doesn't have a manual, okay, to use their product, why do our products require manuals?
Wow, well said. Well said. So to serve a person, to serve a person as a customer, probably the end of it, we are saying people, culture, and probably systems become biggest challenges, and we need to navigate through that. Sanjay, any tips on navigating some of these? You were smiling when I asked that to Raju. I don't know whether it was like, good you didn't ask me, or I have something to share.
No, my views are usually all controversial on these things. But
that's lovely.
I think culture is the biggest elephant in the room always, because everybody takes it for granted and they assume they'll tackle it last, and by then the train is derailed so badly that nothing's worth solving anymore. And I think with culture, the aspect of culture is that it is so deeply embedded that it's even sometimes difficult to know where to start from. So I think it's really first recognizing the change, and I think just being extremely open and honest about it. And I think calling it out as what do we need to change for any of the other behaviors to start to change. Because usually the behaviors that are most celebrated are because if you look at most change management programs in the world, the people most successful in the old regime are the ones who are usually the biggest dissidents and therefore the most influential voices in why the new change will not work. You know, what they say is, re-engineering the corporation, written by Hammer and Champy 40 years back. The 3 reasons why companies change or people change: crisis, threat, foresight. Unfortunately, foresight is only 1%. It's usually crisis. Because what happens in crisis? Because think about the cricket teams, right? It's really tough changing a winning team. It's very difficult for an organization that's winning today, is potentially on the precipice, but is holding a trophy at this point to see the precipice. Well, so culture is actually about having the foresight to know and the maturity to know that the future is not a replica of the past. And that is easier said sitting here, than actually carrying out in practice. But that's the usual fork in the road about driving any of this change. Because most of us we change very well in crisis because there's no other option. Hammer and Champy calls it about if you're driving on a freeway and you hit a stone, you have no choice but to fix the car. The other one is you're driving on a freeway and you see a stone and you figure out, I can't drive on this anymore, I've got to change my route. The third is you're driving on a freeway, it's a nice sunny day, and you're like, why don't I just put a stone behind me for everybody else who's coming down this freeway? Right? That's the foresight 1%. Very rarely do we do that. So that's my take on culture.
You're a storyteller. I love that part too. Outstanding. Time flies in a conversation like that. But I hope customers don't fly, but they stay with us. So on the closing of the session, I see such silent audience. So I think it's good to smile a bit. We're talking customers where they're paying for us. So I think it's good to close on that note to say with all the GCCs here who are spending their day here and they're definitely invested in this session, what are 3 top things we can leave them with to be business value enablers? Of course, be the top of the game, 1. And second, well, this is what worked for you at Sapient, it would work for you at Tesco. And therefore, these are 2 to 3 things of a playbook of sorts to build customer-first culture and in your conversation, monetize it.
So I think my 3 would be, 1, be growth-oriented, which means know your customer. Everyone loves people who can grow the business. People also love people who can make the business more profitable, but they come second. Because when you have revenue, every other problem is worth solving. When you don't have revenue, no other problem is worth solving. So if you're growing revenue, you're always got a seat at the table. Second, build multidimensional perspectives. I think the future is going to belong to people who are shaped like a comb. With generative AI and every other thing that's going to happen, expertise, I feel, I'm not saying it's overrated, but the role for expertise is going to be second to learnability. So if you can learn faster, build more multidimensional perspective, we're going to be more successful. Third is, for the potential that we have as India, our ambition has to be a lot more audacious. I feel in a lot of cases, we're like a 5-gear car that's very comfortable at the speed we hit on 3rd gear because we think we're going fast. But we don't realize we've got 2 more gears we haven't even changed as yet.
For that, we have to build better and more roads, Sanjay.
As to start with.
Let's build roads and then let's zip to
Maybe
100
Gurgaon is a
miles.
better option for that.
Gurgaon is a good option, Bangalore, yeah, we're getting there. But lovely, I love the conversation. Thank you so much. Raju, what do you think are the 3 things that you leave the audience with?
I think the first thing would be is digital adoption, okay, in enabling you to transform faster. It starts from all the way from, right, how you simplify your processes, identifying the opportunities and having the customer focus in doing it and then bringing in the right technologies, product management, and engaging the business at early stages. The second most important for me is actually having a customer-centric focus culture, and they should go into what you are doing in everything. So it's not just thinking customer first, but also is actually understanding the behavior and having a holistic idea about the whole business and the problems they are going through, and the prioritization in the right way to do what is essentially important for us to achieve. Okay? The third one is it's not just about technology. It's about how you take the people, okay, the processes, and the various organization units you have, okay, in this journey. Okay? So sometimes technology can only enable you to do things, but if the people is not part of that, it becomes very difficult. So these are the 3 most essential for me.
Outstanding. I think that was a fabulous conversation. Looks like we're hitting it on time. If there aren't any final comments that you want to talk about in a summarizing way? I hate to summarize a session because there's such a rich discussion of 25 minutes. Each and every word said and a sentence shared is pearl of wisdom. So I think we would leave it at that. But any closing comments from both of you?
I saw the time's up thing. I thought we're done. No, Raju, why don't you go first?
Have visibility.
So, I think firstly, thank you, Supria, for giving the opportunity to speak on a large forum like this. So in my view, right, in organizations which are actually retail focused, okay, the customer-centric becomes a part of what we do every day, okay? And it is essential for us to be staying ahead of it. Otherwise, the retail business is so competitive, and the narrow, okay, margins between what you can make is very thin. Okay, so adaptation, okay, agility, and ability becomes very important factor for us. Thank you.
Yeah, I was reflecting on KSV's slide in the morning, which said that GCCs now contribute to 1% of GDP. So if you think about how do you make that double digit, right? I think we're only limited by our own imagination. So I think that's at least my closing thought. I'm super passionate about this because I feel we've just got, we're sitting on a gold mine and we're digging with a spoon. We got to get more action oriented on this.
I love that. We're sitting at a gold mine and we have a spoon in hand. Let's get the lorries in. I love that. Not a summary, but my takeaway is be bold, be audacious. India, you're sitting at, this is not your decade. This probably is your century. Let's make that work. So if you're having a sight of your customers anyway, go lap them up, hug them, hold them together, use technology, use AI, use whatever is there, the toolkit. If not, develop more. Keep them with you. And in the end, I think we all need to mind this opportunity. So yeah, thank you so much. Customer first, only then we survive, right? Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Raju. Thank you, nasscom.
On that note, we'd like to thank Supria, Sanjay, and Acchuta.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to nasscom YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.